El-Haddad. Here in the studio, we have with us Egyptian activist Hisham Ezza and France 24 producer Mohamed SALEM, and from the University of Exeter, Omar Ashour, who teaches political science there. On its website, the Muslim Brotherhood putting out a statement this Monday backing the police, saying violence is condemned, totally intolerable. And violence is condemned, totally intolerable. Maintaining security is the responsibility of the police, which is a civilian force that knows its national duties very well, away from the political arena. However, for the Atlantic Council's Tariq Radwan, the whole crisis, once again, is about the credibility of the police force. And he writes the following: the roots of this crisis remain in Morsi's inability and apparent unwillingness to tackle the bureaucratic monster that is the Interior Ministry. His repeated statements praising the police during times of crisis, his administration's promise to provide arms, and denial of torture claims show a preference to co-opt the system before any attempt to reform it. Gehad El-Haddad, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that's a very somewhat strange view of the situation, because at the end of the day, the beast that is the bureaucracy is 7 million men strong. It's one of the biggest bureaucracies in the world. It's riddled with corruption and riddled with favoritism, and it's over and above and all of that, it's extremely ineffective. So as it stands at the moment, the reform process requires a lot of injection of assets, resources, and training, which the state currently does not have. It's supposed to be supported by a stable political system, which, since the revolution to this day, we have not yet finalized. The final step in that system is the parliament, which was announced previously by CAF last year, and hopefully the next parliament will be elected in the next couple of months. But there was one fact I did not mention in my previous interaction, which is the fact that a certain psychological element to the police force, whereby they were recruited and trained on the idea that the Muslim Brotherhood to them is their number one enemy within the state, even more than the thugs and the criminals that are ramping around in the street. Now, they find themselves in a position where a Muslim Brotherhood-affiliated president is in office, and they are supposed to follow the political leadership that has been elected in the state itself. So this is a very difficult position for them. Some of them have expressed their anger, some of them have even bordered on mutiny in their reactions. But at the same time, some of them are trying to correct their allegiances to the state and to the service of the citizen himself. I don't think we can label the entire police force as one label or put them in one box. They are much more spread across a spectrum between groups that are still very loyal to the old regime, to a certain extent responsible dramatically for the situation of unrest and instability and security issue on the ground, and on the other side of the spectrum, those who are doing their best to reform the service, to build back the trust between the police force and the citizen, and not finding enough political backing from all the players on the ground that would support them in that position. The bickering has reached a level that the trust no longer exists to build on. And until we have a political system that can legislate these differences, it's going to be a vicious circle on both sides.
All right, so a lack of trust, you say, among the part of the population. Hisham, Assem, what's your reaction to what you've just heard? You just heard the spokesperson there for the Muslim Brotherhood depict how, for many in Egypt, that they associate the police, again, those were his words, as the primary bashing machine of the Mubarak regime.
Police have always been the symbol of the regime. So by the time of Mubarak regime, police was attacked because they are trying to attack Mubarak regime. Now they are attacking the Muslim Brotherhood regime, and the same, it's happening again. They are attacking the police. So in both cases, police is just the symbol of the regime, so they receive the attacks. And this is what drives the police officers crazy. We have done nothing. Now we were blamed that we are using excessive power and we are brutal and that kind of allegations. However, everything has changed. We are not trying to attack anybody. We are just being attacked, and we are trying to defend the legitimacy and the existence of the state itself. So it's very weird to find this kind of attacks that keeps on continuing in each single province in Egypt. So That's something that I want to highlight.
I think,
and for the support, I don't think they have enough empowerment to do their job. I see officers being condemned and judged and sentenced for public opinion cases, which I don't think that those verdicts, with all due respect, would be the same if not this is a public opinion cases. So they feel that they are very vulnerable now.
Mohamed SALEM.
I think most of the people in Egypt think that the police in Mubarak's era is still the police in Morsi's era, and that nothing has changed at all. And I'm really wondering, why is the police striking now and not before? Because I think they want to.
But we've seen, for instance, there was the funeral of those policemen where the interior minister was ushered out because the policemen were angry, feeling they didn't have the government did not have their back.
They are angry, but they still obey the orders. We haven't seen like the police retreating from clashes with protesters. And what I find weird in what some people think and say is that I feel like the police want to be in the role of the victim these days, although the police have committed many crimes and is still committing many crimes, and there has been torture that they have always denied, and there has been killings that they have always denied. The police in Egypt always say that they only have tear gas, although we know that they have rubber bullets. We know that in Port Said, many people have died with real bullets. So where did they come from? They always say this. There are thugs that infiltrate the protesters, but why do thugs always kill the protesters and not the police?
Right.
Very few policemen have been convicted or sentenced to any kind of judgment since the beginning of the revolution, and that's why people are still angry at the police. We haven't seen any reform of the police, and this was one of the main demands of the revolution. And the police have always symbolized and still symbolizes the power of the regime. And the regime has been using it in Mubarak's era as well as in Morsi's era the same way. And I think that's what most of the Egyptians think and live actually day by day.
All right, so the police in your again, there is that perception. Of course, we saw last Friday the police pull out of Port Said, and it was the army that took over. The head of the army in Port Said rejecting calls for return to military rule there. But if the army winds up having to do the police's job, what happens in the long run?
In the long run, actually, we had already experienced this situation, which was the presence of the army as maintaining security in front of the vital buildings and administrations and so on. But this is something that still is going on, and the army did not completely retreat its troops since January 28, 2011.
So right now, on the streets of Port Said,
yes,
who should be keeping the peace? Who should be out there on the beach? Should it be policemen or should it be soldiers?
Let me tell you just a little situation that happened in Port Said during the civil disobedience that was taking place there for more than 10 days in a row. The police retired from their action of maintaining security in the city of Port Said, and citizens were the ones maintaining the global security. There was not a single crime event into Port Said during those 10 days. So we are facing a population that has a political requirement, that has a political issue with political forces. And when the police is an element of interaction with this population, then clashes and violence start. But it doesn't happen when this population is left to itself. So actually, the population of Port Said, for instance, in this case, is not the one who has been starting the violence, because violence only happened when the police was still there. Since the police retired from Port Said on Friday, there hasn't been any act of violence, and the relationship between...
So are you saying the army should take over the police's duties?
The army's role is not to cover the police's duties. This is the problem we're facing now, that we are put into a dilemma.
So you need a police.
We need a police, but we need a police that is reformed. So the whole issue is that we are put in front of a theatrical play with the police playing the role of the victim, with the Muslim Brotherhood on the tongue on Mr. El-Haddad that was saying that the police considers, some of the policemen consider that the Muslim Brotherhood were the enemies of yesterday and cannot forget this animosity. Both are playing victims, while both of them, the police and the Muslim Brotherhood, are playing hand in hand, and they are, as it was read in the media, Morsi is co-opting this repressive police force into his political action. So for me, both are actually part of the same deal. There is a deal that was passed with the arrival of Mohamed Morsi into the presidency between him and the police, that the police should accept his presence into the presidency, and that he will keep the police as they are, as they like to be.
All right, so if we sum up everything that's been said so far, Omar, Ashour, would you say that today in Egypt there is a political vacuum? A power vacuum.
I think to sum up, I think what's happening is that everybody is like the role of being the victim. But we really have a situation where there is a serious conflict in the country, where you have on the one hand, just a little statistic, 186 police officers and policemen were killed so far. If you compare this to the 1990s, when we had a low-level insurgency of 6 years, you had 406 killed in that insurgency, a 6-year insurgency. So we're talking about, a serious level of violence in the country, and this is a big issue, because sometimes we activists forget the fact that there is another dimension for the police force. The police force under Mubarak was, its principal role was to crack down on political opposition, but also there is a criminal dimension. Their role is to crack down on criminals as well. And when you have a power vacuum right now, if you go outside of Egypt and talk to the average Egyptian citizen in the central delta or in the central upper Egypt, they will be complaining about ransoms, kidnaps, organized crime, drug trafficking, and a whole list of other dimensions that, without the Ministry of Interior, really, the army could not deal with this. And vigilante groups and private militias as well cannot deal with this. We know for vigilante groups, we're not reinventing the wheel. We know they work for 10 days or 20 days. But after that, they turn into private militias, and you will have a whole different dimension to deal with. So the situation is really serious. On the one hand, you have a very slow security sector reform process that did not progress ahead. Part of it because of the balance of power within the Ministry of Interior. Part of it because of there is will in the presidency, I see, but there is no capacity on the other hand. But part of it also because of the politicization of security in Egypt. Right now, every single political party or figure is trying to manipulate the security sector and take it on its side. So somehow it can manipulate it and use it as a way to either leverage for power or as a method to attain power, the method to go directly into the presidential palace with the help of the arms and the tanks.
All right,
this is a serious problem.
And I'm going to add another layer of complication to all of this. We're getting a news report that the Interior Minister, Mohamed Ibrahim, has been summoned next Sunday by a judge over the violence in Port Said. Hisham, Assem, is this the right time for him to be brought in?
Well, if this is the call of the judge, I mean, if the judge called him, then he called him. So it's always the right time for the judge to do this.
And what do you think of it? Does the Interior Minister bear responsibility for what's going on?
Well, he definitely bears because he is the Minister of Interior. But for honesty and for the transparency, I have a humble piece of opinion in this. Most of the casualties and deaths are resulted by short-range, inaccurate kind of bullets. That type of guns and firearms are widespread in Cairo and Egypt generally. So it might be caused from a short range. That means not from the forces. I'm not trying to defend the law enforcement here as much as I'm trying to reveal the question from my experience and my knowledge as an expert in the firearms. So it's been shot from a very short range. And this is according to most of the autopsy, the forensic
many testimonies in Port Said
autopsy.
of people say that they were fired at from above, from
by
from the buildings,
unidentified car. Yes, I heard
from
this.
high
And buildings.
places, and there are videos showing like snipers shooting at people in Port Said, and the people of Port Said themselves have said that more than once, and they know who shot them. They know that it was coming from the police. So I find it really weird. The police have always been denying that they killed anyone, and in addition to that, almost no one of them has been tried, has been facing a judge. Only, for example, the guy who has shot and who was filmed shooting one in the eye has got 3 years in prison.
Yes,
and I wonder how many eyes
this is something I want to identify.
From people.
Hisham Assem.
Yes, please. The firearm that he used is not the typical firearm that anybody can aim at. This is a 12 caliber shot that you can never aim specifically at the eye. So you can just shoot, and then it spreads over the face, and it will never be the same like this. So this is something.
This type of weapon is supposed is internationally. These type of repressing mob repressive weapons are supposed to be used with very clear indications. Shot of bird shots of this type are supposed to be shot directly to the legs, not to the upper part of the body. So this is why we have injuries in the head and in the eyes.
Yes, sir.
So
you are
this
correct.
is the point.
But this is in the short range, because in the long range it just spread. Nobody can control
then
them.
It is used.
So I'm shooting
then it is used in a way that is
something
opposed to the legal way of using it.
And it's even opposite to what the police always says, that they're only armed with tear gas, because even the Minister of Interior has said that, and many responsibles in the police have said that. Although protesters themselves, they see the police with bird shots, guns, sometimes with real bullets. The other day, Sky News, they filmed one protester who was shot while he was running, and we saw the footage on Egyptian channels, and we saw the police officer who shot him.
Yes.
It was filmed,
when you see this,
slow motion.
you can never tell. You can never tell it's a real cartridge or not, because sometimes we use the sound cartridge just to make the demonstrators go back, because they are trying to physically interact with the soldiers, which will definitely result casualties. So
Hisham,
this is for
right,
their sake
and
our sake.
Well, unfortunately, we're running low on time. I'm going to have to end it there. It's a discussion that will continue. I want to thank our guests, Hisham Assem and Gehad El-Haddad, for joining us from Cairo. I want to thank as well from the University of Exeter, Omar, Ashour, and here in the studio, Hisham Ezza and Mohamed SALEM. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.